డార్క్ ఉన్నదే పెట్టు.
అది పైన సెట్ అవుతుందా?
ఇంకా పైకి పెట్టమంటే ఇట్లా పెడతా. నేను ఎలాగో ఇది వేస్తా.
డార్క్ ఉంచాలి, వైట్
అదే డార్క్
రిలాక్స్ అయినప్పుడు హెడ్ ఫీల్ డౌన్ చేసుకోండి.
హెడ్ డౌన్ చేసుకోన్నా. బాగుందా? టై అయ్యద్నా?
మీ హెడ్ కి టెక్స్ట్ కి గ్యాప్ ఉంటుంది సార్, అది
వద్దా? ఇప్పుడు వద్దా?
పైన ఉంది కదా, ఎగ్జాక్ట్లీ మీరు అర్థమైతలేదు సార్ వాయిస్.
ఇప్పుడు కరెక్ట్ ఉంది.
separation of that.
క్లయింట్ వచ్చి ఇప్పుడు వచ్చింది. ఓకే, గాట్ ఇట్. ఓకే, రెడీయా? లైన్లో
Hello.
ఉండు. Good morning. Good morning, Shasti. How are
How
you?
are you? Good. How are you?
I'm doing good. Good to see you.
You too. Thank you for doing this. It's so exciting.
Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us and spending your time. So I think you all set. A little bit, if you can do little down. Yeah,
Little down. Okay.
more little. Maybe you match my head.
Okay.
Perfect.
There we go. There we go. Yeah. Okay.
So I think I got a couple of questions too from that. I think Hope Will spoke to you.
Yes. Yes, he did. Yeah.
Yeah. So I know that. Yeah. Okay. So Lalesh, is that ready? One second. It's too early for you? Or you wake up early usually?
It's a little early, but it's totally okay. I've been traveling a lot this week, so it's busy. Yeah.
Please do let me know when you are in Atlanta.
Okay. Yes.
Have you been here since 1 or 2 years?
I have not. I have been, last time I was in India 2018, I think. Yeah.
How about Atlanta?
Atlanta? I was in Atlanta in 2021.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh, you're based in Atlanta?
Yeah, I'm based in
Oh, okay. I love Atlanta. That's one of my favorite cities. Yeah.
Yeah, Georgia is my home now.
Okay.
One second, let me finish this guy. We'll start it. I think everything is ready. Lalesh,
Okay.
are you ready? Ready? Lalesh, are you ready? Yeah, please do that fast. It is already 11:32. I was watching so many videos about you, to get more insight about you. It's a great journey. I think
Yeah.
working in White House, it's like goosebumps, right?
Yeah.
Just trying to learn a lot of things, how you have entered into, I think you entered like 12th grade or so.
Yeah, when I was at the White House?
No, into the, I think White House.
You're into politics?
Directly entered into White
Yeah.
House.
Yeah.
That's a great opportunity.
Yeah, I worked in politics even when I was in high school, and yeah.
So one of the high schooler asked the same question. Now,
Yeah.
how to get into politics? So it will be very, very interesting. I think
Okay.
we need to pull people. That's what I need your guidance. How to bring the youth, like 11th grade, 12th grade people into the politics, at least to
Yeah.
know more about that.
Mhm.
So I've been also working with the local politicians to engage. I don't know how to engage
Mhm.
because again, I do my day job. This is my passion. So I wanted to hear from you all how to get engaged, and what kind of events, if you do, there will be an awareness for people to join.
Yes. Yeah,
Maybe
absolutely.
offline I'll ask you more questions.
Okay. Yeah, deal. Yeah,
Just 1 minute. I think
no problem.
they are going to send the streaming link to the TV5, which is the main channel.
Okay. And are we basically like live to we'll be okay.
Yeah, we'll be live, and also I'll be doing some editing as well.
Okay.
So it's all I do on my passion. So I'm just thinking how to make this more good production. So people are giving a lot of respect, and they are appreciating the work, and they are also seeing the value, right? To have the connect between people when they need something, instead of doing when they need. It's always better have an idea before. So
good. Yeah.
People ask me sometimes, hey, can you do this show? Can you do that show? So, they'll be benefited. So all local practical items, if they need, I will bring them
Mhm.
onto the show. And I
Okay.
thought Indo-Americans will be really inspiration, right? How did they join? What made them think? And
Yes.
ordinary people, what they are lacking. That's only
Mhm.
my interest. And my interest is not to the viewership and all those kinds of stuff. My interest is to learn. Even one person is inspired by this video, I'm achieved. That's all.
Yes. Yes. I love that. Yeah, that's fantastic. Have you ever had Pramila Jayapal on?
No,
Okay, she's one of our Congress people.
please let me know
Yeah.
if it's interesting people. I
Mhm.
ready, Lalish. It's already time. Okay. Okay. Ready. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon. Welcome to Insight with Praveen Puram. Thanks for watching live from Atlanta, from TV5 and Mana TV. We have been doing number of shows from the achievements of all the Indo-American community. And I know March is the week of Women's Day. So definitely I thought to bring a women leader, not only the entrepreneur, but also in politics, women in politics. So today's our esteemed guest is Shasti Conrad. Good morning. Thank you so much for joining us, Shasti. I know it is very early in Seattle and you made it. Thank you so much.
Good
So,
morning. Thanks for having me.
thank you. So, Shasti, when we talk about Shasti, she has a great journey in political career. So, I will introduce more about Shasti and then we will get into the crux of the meeting to know more about her journey, to know more about her political career, and then we will learn more about her. So, Shasti Conrad she is the chair of Washington State Democrats. She is the youngest and also from the Indo-American community. She is the first one to have this position. And she's also previously, she was chair of the King County Democrats from 2018 to 22. And she was the first woman of color chair in the organization's history. And she was the state committee woman for the 37th legislative district in the Washington state, first vice chair of King County Democrats and election committee, and co-chair of Washington State Democrats. She is a versatile strategist and thought leader with a broad range of political policy and operations experience within the government at all the levels and throughout the private and non-profit sector. She launched her own consulting in 2016 to support government campaigns and business clients looking to better our world. She named to the American Association of Political Consultants 40 under 40 list and Seattle's Met's 100 most influential list, top 10 in political category. Shasti served President Obama as senior staff assistant in the White House and a briefings manager on the 2012 campaign, leading the preparation of daily briefings on all the campaign events, meetings, political backgrounds for the president, first lady, and the vice president. Shasti's first job was an intern in the White House of urban affairs and as traveling advanced staff for Vice President Biden. Since leaving the White House, Shasti has served as senior graduate fellow at the Malala Fund, providing programmatic support within the organization and staffing Malala Yousafzai and her family at the 2014 Nobel Prize ceremony. She served on the national advance team for the Senator Bernie Sanders 2016 presidential campaign and later as political director on Jim Barksdale campaign for US Senate in Georgia. Between 2017 and 2020, Shasti was the US campaign manager and regional planning advisor for 100 million campaign launched by Nobel Peace Prize winner Kailash Satyarthi, which aims to be the largest young mobilization in the history to end child labor and trafficking. She was the national director of surrogates for the Bernie Sanders campaign, recruiting and deploying over 250 celebrities, influencers, policy experts, musicians, and activities across the country. In 2020, Shasti launched 2 PACs to support the general election, focusing on electing Black women to the WA state legislation and focus on voter registration and turnout. What an incredible journey, Shasti.
Thank you.
It's amazing. I think I will let you add if I have missed any.
No, I think you covered it. Hearing it back, it is, I was like, wow, that's quite a lot to get done.
So Shasti, this program is purely about influencing the Indo-Americans, acknowledging the Indo-Americans, and how to get more knowledge to the Indo-Americans and also the NRIs, the Indians in America. So tell us about your journey. You have come into the political background in a very, very young stage. I don't think anyone would have done in a White House at almost like 20, 22 years of old.
Mm-hmm.
So tell us more about your journey. Why did you choose political, and what are your roots with India?
Mm-hmm. So I was born in Calcutta, and I was adopted to the United States, and I made that trip when I was just an infant, just a couple months old. I was left at an orphanage and matched then onto a list to with my adoptive mother in Oregon, which is state just south of Washington State, where I now live. And I was one of the only Indian people in my small town in Oregon. But my mom felt it was really important for me to be connected to my Indian heritage. And so I was raised, reading books about India, learning about, sort of the heroes of India, and different having my mom made sure I had a doll that looked like me. And so I had pride in my skin color and in my hair and in my, brown eyes. She wanted me to be really proud of where I came from. And so that definitely was a major part of my childhood. Was, even though I was in a community where there weren't a lot of people who looked like me, I still grew up feeling this connection back to, to the mother country, back to India. And my family, my adoptive family, my grandmother was British and had moved to the United States during World War II. And shortly before I came into the picture, she was starting to study for like her American citizenship test. She hadn't been a US citizen for many, many years. And so in my sort of young childhood, my grandmother, was really proud to be a new American. And so she talked a lot about civic engagement. She would take me to the polls, every couple years when we would go voting. She would take me with her. We would talk about politics at the dinner table. And it was just something that was a part of my, growing up. It was just my family really believed that, that was your way of giving back, was to participate in community organizing, helping your neighbors, helping to pick leadership that would hopefully represent you and represent your community. And so I don't know, I just fell into it, the joke was that I would, talk about politics on the playground, with my preschool teachers, and be like, well, why are you supporting Ronald Reagan? You should be supporting, the Democrat. And I was just always doing that. And then in high school, I worked on my first campaign, which was a school bond levy campaign that was about getting more money into the public schools. And, I learned to make phone calls and knock on doors and talk to people and tell them about, why it mattered that they voted and why it mattered that they supported my school. And I caught the bug, and it was just kind of was this, excitement, and it was fun for me, and there was a lot of energy, and that's really what kind of pulled me into this political work.
Absolutely. So I understand that no one has political background in your stepmother or the grandmother's family.
No, my mom owned a daycare center when I was growing up, and was really, sort of passionate about education and sort of teaching children to have a sort of step up in their lives. And my grandmother was a homemaker and my grandfather was, a salesman. So they were not in politics at all. There's no history of it in the family. They just were people who cared about their community. And as I've gotten older, I've realized how much that sort of community organizing really influenced me, made me believe that this was that you could make change, that you could actually have an impact, but that it was also part of this sort of contract with being a good citizen in the United States. That you needed to be there um for other people and to help people and be engaged and pay attention to the news and that kind of stuff. That was the responsibility of getting to be here in the United States.
Very, very interesting, Shasti. When I think about your journey, when you were small, you already did a campaign without your notice. But when did you think that you need to join a party? Like when you see there are only two parties in this country, major parties, Republican and Democratic, right?
Mhm.
So at which stage you have decided yourself that I'm going to join Democrats?
Yeah, I mean, I've often thought about this because, I've met people, throughout my life and, a number of folks who have changed parties. They grew up as their family was Republican and they really looked at the issues and made a decision when they were older that they wanted to be a Democrat and that was their sort of independent choice. My grandfather had been a Republican, but my mom, who was this very, grew up in the 60s and the 70s, was this very sort of flower child hippie who, really believed in peace and in caring about the environment. And she really convinced him that it was the Democratic Party that represented our family's beliefs better than the Republican Party. That the being a Democrat meant that you cared about other people, that you cared about people who are struggling, you cared about people of color. And so my family just like had those values and that matched with the Democratic Party. And so, the people that we were talking about were, John F. Kennedy and Jimmy Carter and then, Bill Clinton. And, those were the leaders that my family just talked about and admired and respected. And so that's what I just grew up believing that was, that those were the folks that was the party that fit me, that would understand me and would see me, because there weren't a lot of people of color in the other party, that there were more leaders. My congressperson growing up was a man named David Wu, who was I believe, Chinese American.
Mhm.
And, he was a Democrat. And I was like, oh, like Asian people, brown people, we're Democrats. That's who, that's who knows us. That's who sees us. And of course, as I've seen more that is not entirely the case. There are a number of Asian Americans who are Republicans and run as Republicans, but I've just always felt that the Democratic Party represented my values better than the other party.
Shasti, having the roots of India, right? And every Indian come to this great country for great opportunities. So obviously, the immigration would be a touching point to every one of us. So during your journey, did you ever think that, like me, people should come to this country and you need to make more reforms in the immigration? So there might be a border immigration, there might be a skilled labor immigration. So what are your thoughts? And after taking this responsibility, in your journey, did you feel that you need to add something to this?
Absolutely. I mean, I think some of my calling into politics, and particularly into the Democratic Party, is because I see that, our party, we're the ones who are standing up for immigrants, and that, there's a responsibility as someone who was adopted into the United States that, like, this is the duty, is to give back and to make sure that more people like me have opportunity. I believe coming to the United States, being able to have the education that I have had, I went to college at Seattle University, which is what brought me to Washington State. I was able to go on a scholarship, and I've been able to go to graduate school and have all of these sort of opportunities that I really only think you can get here in the United States. And to in one generation to go from Calcutta all the way to here, where now I'm in this leadership role, that's a special thing that means that I need to give back. I need to make sure that there are more people coming in behind me. And the Democratic Party, our leadership has been working for years to try to make it easier for more people to come in from other places around the world. I think particularly our party has stood up for Black and brown people to come into the United States in ways that the Republican Party has dehumanized us, has Trump called our home countries a really nasty name, and has said some really awful things about where we come from, and they have tried to dehumanize us. And the United States doesn't work without us. It doesn't work without our brain power and our hard work. The culture that we bring into the United States, that we are what make the US so special. And so that is a major component of my work, is to make sure that we keep these, sort of borders open in a fair process for folks like us to be able to come in.
Great to know, Shasti. So if you think back, your 6 years were very, very crucial in your political life. If you look back your 6 years, you have been like progressing in your career, political career especially. So when you see in these 6 years, what comes to your mind, how the community has grown, or how you want the other women to be part of this political environment? So how is your engagement with the Indo-Americans or Asians? So what is your observation?
Well, in Washington State, probably our largest, sort of community of color in the state is Asian Americans, and South Asians, and particularly Indians, are at the absolute sort of biggest part of that community and the diaspora here. We have a number of major tech companies here in Washington State. Microsoft, Google has a headquarter office here. We have a lot of sort of these tech opportunities that have brought particularly Indo-Americans into our state. And up until maybe, I don't know, six, like you said, sort of 6-7 years ago, Indo-Americans were not running for office in our state. They were not, you didn't see many people who looked like us that were in these leadership positions. And then the thing that's been so fascinating is it's been mostly women, and Indian American women, who have been stepping forward and running for office. So here in Washington State, we have Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal. She ran and was the sort of one bright spot for us in 2016, the year that Trump won. She also won her congressional seat, and she's now the chair of the Progressive Caucus and has a big national role, but she's anchored right here in Washington State. In 2017, we flipped our Washington State legislature from Republican majority to Democratic majority by winning a seat with State Senator Manka Dhingra, who's also an Indian American woman. And, we've had a number of really incredible Indian American people who have run for office, particularly in these last several years. And it's really exciting because there's more of us. We can support each other. We can work together. We can talk about, the issues like you were bringing up around like immigration and, making sure that our community has what it needs. And we have a voice because we're at the table. We're here in the mix of all of that. And, I'm seeing that happen across the country too, where we're having more, Asian Americans, in particular Indian Americans, running for office. She's not my cup of tea, but even seeing Nikki Haley run for president, not my choice because she's a Republican, but it is something to see someone like that take a national stage and run for office, and I just don't think we would have even imagined that would be possible 10 years ago.
Absolutely. I totally agree that. Shasti, then when you talk about the youth today, right? After the progression, like last 10 years or 6 years, you see a lot of progression in Indo-American community, especially where do you start with the political career? For example, people who are interested, mostly the community leaders, the youth who are participating in the events, they might be interested to join the politics. So where do you think the opportunities are to start with?
Yeah, I mean, it is just it goes back to the sort of basic components of organizing and campaigning, which is, getting involved with your local party organization. Here in Washington state, we have legislative districts and we have county party organizations. We have 88 here in Washington state. And in your own local community, you can look up and find when your Democratic Party meets, who the chair is. Normally we have their contact information out there, and folks can reach out and they can see about getting starting to attend and how they can help in their local party organizations. The other way that happens, and it was one of the ways that I really got involved, was I found candidates that I was really excited that were running for office, and I volunteered on their campaigns. So paying attention to see, like, this year in Washington, it's a lot of local races. So there's people running for city councils, for school boards. And a lot of times those are first-time candidates. A lot of times they're more diverse. It's a lot of, people of color, first-time candidates, women. And they are just starting and they need all the help they can get. And so if you have, some energy and some time and, you want to just help with making some phone calls or knocking on some doors and talking about why you're excited to support this candidate, that is such a huge help. And that's how I started. You don't have to be an expert, you don't have to know everything. You just have to have a little bit of that fearlessness to go and talk to other people. And I think then that opens the doors for all these other types of ways of getting involved that might even lead you to run for office yourself someday. And I think particularly for young people, there's a number of, on college campuses, even high schools, there's the Young Democrats and there's different chapters where they can get involved in the party by joining their Young Democrats chapter or College Democrats chapter.
So do you think that the youngs, like the high school students joining in politics will be a digression from their education or career? Or do you think it should be a part of what are your thoughts? Do they need to be engaged not to digress from their career, or they should be, balanced out between it? What are your thoughts for them?
I mean, it could become your career. I did it as kind of like a extracurricular activity, and then I loved it so much, and the opportunities just kind of kept opening up. The doors opened where, I did a good job on one campaign, and then somebody noticed that and said, well, why don't you come and help me over here? Why don't you apply for this job and I'll recommend you and I'll help you. So I think that it's a part of making your education come to life. It's like we study in books about different social movements. We'll study about Gandhi, right? And leading the independence movement and we'll read about this stuff. But being in politics allows you to live it, allows you to be in it. And I think it's such a major part of being alive, being sort of a part of a community at this time. I think particularly for young people right now, the issues are so big. We are tackling things like the climate crisis. We are talking about human rights. In the United States, there's this movement around what kids can read at their school. They're banning books. There's talk of whether all kids have access to healthcare. These are issues that are impacting young people. And for far too long, we have allowed older people to because they vote in much larger numbers than younger people. We've allowed them to set the agenda. And if we want to take back and if we want to have a say in our future, we have to participate, you know? And I think you're seeing that movement of young people, of high school students and, you know, college students protesting and being involved and speaking out against, you know, gun violence at their schools and speaking up for we've got to do more to protect the environment. And, you know, I think all of that sort of activism is really important, but we have to make sure that we vote, you know, that activism leads us to being able to pick leaders who will stand with us and will actually do what we want them to do, which is to, you know, make choices for our future, you know, that will help us to, you know, have a planet and an economy that is beneficial to, you know, our young people. So not a digression at all. Yeah.
Absolutely fantastic. I think one interesting point you touched, the older people have been voting and the younger people have not been voting. And if you see Indo-Americans, the percentage of vote is not that much. So you have been a critical role, right? Like campaign, 100 million campaign, and that too for a presidential campaign manager is not a small thing. So during the course of exercising your role, did you ever feel something we need to do of the Indo-Americans participation in vote and the young crowd to participate in the vote? What are your few steps you have taken and how did you see the progress?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I was really proud to work on the 100 million campaign, which was led by India's first Nobel Peace Prize winner, Kailash Satyarthi. And my job there was to work with young people. It was to like try to get chapters on colleges founded so that it was young people that were really leading this movement to try to end child labor. And it was this idea of trying to connect that, you know, young people who were, you know, a lot of folks in India, but in places all around the world who were in these positions where they had no power, that those of us who were in places where we did have access to more power, where we could vote or we had more resources, that we were a part of that family that included young people who didn't have that same access to power, and that we needed to step forward to help those folks. And you know, I think that once you were able to talk about the issues and you were able to I was able to talk about, you know, actual stories of, you know, this young person, you know, Amar, who had been sort of sold into child labor when he was a young child. And now, you know, he'd been sort of rescued by Kailash and, you know, was now going to college and was now had this whole future in front of him. You know, having those stories really made it so that then there was this deep sort of personal connection that young people who, you know, were on a completely different continent suddenly felt like, okay, I feel that I have this responsibility to stand up for people like Amar, you know, in India. And I think that that's a big part of it, is that there's so much going on, right? There's so much noise on TV and, you know, in the news and radio, like there's just so, and the internet, there's so much to pay attention to that it actually makes people want to disengage, right? It just is like, I'm just trying to get through my day. I'm tired. I'm just trying to, you know, go to school or get my work done. And, you know, I think what's most important is that reminder of, you know, sort of responsibility and engagement to others, that we, as tired as we are, we owe it to ourselves and each other to choose to stay involved, you know, to choose to pay attention to what's happening in your own community, you know, in Atlanta, right? Like there are so many issues that are happening in Atlanta right now. There's Cop City that is being built, right? And, you know, that's a scary thing that, you know, could have ramifications across the country about how we engage with like law enforcement. We have to pay attention to that. You know, we have to think about how, you know, there was a young activist that was killed there. that person's life needs to matter, and we need to remember someone like that and say like, okay, I'm going to vote, or I'm going to go to that protest, or I'm going to, I'm going to read the news so that I'm aware of it and I can tell other people about why they should care and why I care. And so I think that's a really important, is like the leaning into this, not backing away. In 2016, the largest voting bloc were folks who did not vote. And that is what I wake up every day thinking about. How do I reach those folks? The 66 million people who didn't vote. And had we just had a few more, particularly young people who had voted in that election, we wouldn't have had President Trump. And the country would be in a totally different place had that not happened. So, that's part of my responsibility as the leader of the Democratic Party, is to build a party that folks want to be a part of and want to see that there can be good work, and that if they participate, that their lives will be better, that will actually have an impact for them and their community. And that's the job. That's our job as party leaders, to do that work.
Absolutely. So let's just switching the little bit gears here and there. I just wanted to, go back and ask the role of you are the leader of the party in your state, right?
Yes.
So do you have any influence on the administration policies or anything? So how do you differentiate your role in the government?
Yeah. So my job is, I'm primarily on the sort of campaign side and of making sure that we are electing, great Democrats up and down the ballot here in Washington state. But, my job is also to reflect the messaging of the Democratic Party. And right now, President Biden is the leader of our party across the entire country. And so, what happens in the administration, what happens in Washington, D.C. has a direct impact onto what's happening in my, in the other Washington, in my state of Washington. And I think the impact or influence that, we may have on the administration is, we send really solid Democrats back to DC who are standing up for us. And we have to continue to remind them that this is what we are asking for. We're asking for them to actually fight for, the child care tax credit, or to help us get health care and help us get, different sort of infrastructure projects brought back to our state. Also in terms of the messaging, a lot of times in Washington, D.C., they forget there's a disconnect of like what the rest of us are facing in the other parts of the country. And so they'll sort of do this like DC speak, and it doesn't translate to, folks that are living in like rural parts of the country. In Washington state, we're pretty blue. We have a lot of, our governor is a Democrat, we have a majority of our congressional members are Democrats, but there are parts of the state that are still very red, that are very Republican. And, there are good Democrats who live in those parts of the state who don't feel like they're being represented. They don't feel like they've got people who are looking out for them or thinking about like, what their families need. And, folks in Washington, D.C., I think sometimes forget about us needing to make sure that we're speaking to those folks too. So I see my job as both, sort of representing Washington state, doing the organizing work in the state, but also to remind the folks like President Biden and the leaders of our Democratic Party in Washington, D.C. and on the East Coast, like who our people are, and what we're passionate about. And in Washington state, it's a beautiful state. It's, lots of trees and mountains, and, and so the environment is very important to us, and taking care of the environment is incredibly important. And, that's something that we stand up for. And so that's kind of the way that influence works. I wish I had more influence sometimes on being able to set policy, but we just are here to try to send really good people, and then just be a loud voice to say like, don't forget about us, and we're an important
Absolutely.
voting bloc too.
So I think definitely I have more questions around that, but in the limitation of time, my interest would be definitely your experience in the White House. I'm sure that getting an opportunity in White House, it's not so easy. So before digressing, I wanted to ask your experience to, tell us about your White House experience, being in front of the president, how many times you had good times, bad times. So please let us know what was your experience.
Yes, so my senior year in college, in 2007, that was the year that Obama announced that he was going to run for president. And I had read his book Dreams from My Father, where he had talked about sort of being this like cultural translator of having been raised by a white family, but being, a man of color. And that resonated with me because it was so similar in that I had been raised by a white family, but my lived experience was as a woman of color. And so I just, I just was so inspired by Obama. And so I just jumped on his campaign, just like I was saying earlier about like, for young people, you never know where it's going to take you. And I just started volunteering and was making phone calls and knocking doors, and then we won, which wasn't the expected outcome. And a friend of mine had gone to the White House to start the internship program, and she called me and she said, I think you should apply for this. And there were 6,000 people who applied for 100 spots in that first summer in 2009 in the internship program. And I was one of them. And I was in the first class of Obama White House interns. And I was in the Office of Urban Affairs, and I just loved it. It was such a time of hope. People really, we had done the impossible. Nobody thought we were going to be able to elect the first Black president to the United States. And so there was so much excitement, so much energy. I was in my early 20s, and I just loved it. And so I wanted to stay, and I decided to try to get a job in the administration. And a few months after my internship ended, I did get that job. And I worked in the Office of Public Engagement, which was all about building relationships in the community and bringing them into government. And then I was promoted to work for Valerie Jarrett, who is the senior advisor to President Obama. And she had an office in the West Wing, and I was able to have a seat outside her office in the West Wing. We were a floor above President Obama. And it was just like one of the most exciting times in my life. And I had a front row seat to history. I was there when we passed healthcare reform. I was there when we passed Don't Ask, Don't Tell, or repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell, which was related to LGBT rights. And, I just had the time of my life getting to sort of see what that was like. And, President Obama was just such a special, inspirational figure. He had come out of a community organizing background, so he knew how important it was to connect with people, and inspire folks to get involved and, demystify the political process so people felt like they could participate. And, that set me off on this trajectory where I am now, that, I never thought that this would be possible, but that time at the White House was just so special. And I left to go then on his 2012 campaign in Chicago, and then I worked on inauguration and sort of saw that chapter through. But it was just a very exciting, special time. And one of my most precious memories is I was able to introduce my mom to President Obama in the Oval Office when I was leaving. And, he was so kind to her. And, as we were walking out of the Oval Office, she turned to me and she was like, my daughter, born in India, just introduced me to the first Black president. Like, this is the America that I believe in. This is the hope and the dream and the promise that we have believed that America could be. And, I take that with me, every day, of just that sort of moment of pride, but like how special, my story has been. And it really, I feel like, could only happen, here in some ways. But I'm so proud of my roots in India to be able to bring that, into a space like the White House.
Wow, really, definitely it's a pride. And did you get an opportunity to talk to him one-to-one? Because talking to a president one-to-one is not easy. What was your feeling? Were you nervous, or how did you really feel when you had that time?
Yes, I was very nervous and very sort of, pretending like I had it together, but inside I was sort of squealing a little bit, like, yeah, he's so kind. He's so, he's such a charismatic, personable person that he puts you at ease, like right away. He was just and he was so kind to my mom. My mom like had never really left the West Coast. She was basically owned a daycare center, and just kind of was like a really good worker bee. That was my mom's style, of pretty sort of shy. And he was just so kind and welcoming to her, and asked her about herself, and asked her about what it was like living out here in Seattle. And so, yeah, it was just, he just made it easy, but I definitely remember just saying over and over again, like, thank you. It's so nice to meet you. And he was kind of like, okay. Like, you don't have to keep saying thank you. You can just be a normal person. And yeah.
And being in the White House, sometimes it's pride, sometimes it's also threatened, right?
Mm-hmm.
We never know what's going to happen. So were any situations felt you that I'm tense being here, never know what will happen? Any moments like that?
Many. I was there in the early days, and so there were crises all of the time. We were in the middle. I remember there was like the government shutdown where we had to stop working for a few days. There was, the joke used to be, there was a crisis every August, because that was when the president would go on vacation.
Mhm.
And there was like an oil spill one year that was a major crisis. And there was the Republicans were always sort of fighting us and making things difficult. And there were threats. I mean, the early days too, he was the first Black president. And, honestly, we were always worried about his safety. There were, in those early days, we were scared that, we couldn't imagine that America would let us have a Black president for all 8 years. And so there were times when we were very nervous about what would happen. I would work long hours and stay at the office because I was just so, I loved being there, but also was like, something might happen and I need to be there, and I need, and I was,
Absolutely.
so yes, there were a lot of tense times, but there were also a lot of really good fun times, and, good staff that supported me. And, a number of my close friends and mentors come out of the Obama world and have still been supportive. Our friend Cal Penn, who is an actor, but he came and worked at the White House for a couple of years to do youth engagement. He's been hosting The Daily Show this past week, and I texted him to say great job, and he did an interview with President Biden and how great it was to see him back in the Oval Office. And I shared my news with him that I'm the first South Asian woman to lead a political party, and he texted right back and was like, I'm so proud of you. And that's a relationship that's 12 years old now, and so it's really nice to have that kind of support and see us kind of moving on into the world.
It's like goosebumps to me when I'm talking to you about all these things. And you definitely, we saw an African president, and very soon I'm very much waiting to see a woman president very soon for this country.
Yes.
Fingers crossed. And one thing I wanted to ask you, when President Obama went to India, right? Definitely you are in the White House, and there might be people encountering, talking to you. Did you ever happen to go to India during that time and have that pride there?
I did not get that chance to go with him on that trip. I got to go to South Africa with his family, and Australia while I was there, which was very, very special. But I remember that trip to India and how meaningful that was for him and for the for the country to have him visiting India. And I know that President Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris have made visits to India as well. And I think that relationship is so important. I just was meeting with the consular general from India that's based in San Francisco this past week, and he was saying that President Modi and President Biden have met and spoken at least 18 times already in the 2 years that President Biden's been in office. And so the relationship between our two countries is still it's incredibly important. And India is the world's largest democracy, and so we have a lot to sort of share, and growing pains that both of the US and India are going through, and sort of various activism and all. There's a lot of similarities between what our countries are experiencing, and I think it's important that we keep those connections really tight.
A time check, I think we are moving away. I know that you are busy, but I wanted to ask a couple of questions from the community. There is one girl, Ameya Agnihotri. She is from a senior from the Gwinnett School of Math. She says that, I am the vice chair of the Gwinnett chapter of Georgia High School Democrats. I will be starting college in fall, and I'm a TEDx speaker. My question for Mrs. Conrad is, as high schoolers and college students, many of us having recently become eligible to vote, but generally it is difficult to find places to get involved politically in our communities. What are the good ways for young people to become politically active and better serve the communities?
What's her name again?
Her name is Ameya.
Ameya, that is a great question. And I worked in Georgia at one point, so I know Gwinnett County, and I'm just so happy that she's involved in her high school Democrats chapter. Ameya, you're doing it, like, by being involved in a chapter like that. And when you go to college, I hope you get involved in your college Democrats chapter as well. Like I said, like working on campaigns, getting involved, asking your elected officials what you can do, what kind of initiatives they're working on, if there are things that you can get involved in. There's been a big movement to try to get youth councils added to city government, and asking your local mayor if they would be interested in building out a youth council. That's a really great opportunity. And Ameya, maybe you're going to run for office someday, and you're going to show us all. And don't wait. Like, I think my friend Maxwell Frost is just 25 years old, and he's now a member of Congress. So more and more young people are doing the thing. They're getting involved, and so just keep it up. Good job, Ameya.
And one other question, I don't know whether I should ask or not, but it's really around anti-Hindu that was in one of the council in Washington state. So people wanted to know whether that is true or not. So I know that it is a political question. This forum is very purely for Indo-Americans, but if you can, please try to answer that.
Yeah, my guess is that they are referring to the Seattle City Council took up ending caste discrimination, which I hadn't fully realized is still a really big deal, even here in Washington State. I would not characterize it as anti-Hindu. I would characterize it as trying to remove the barriers around the way that there is sometimes there's a caste system that is a hierarchy of people who are considered better than others, and trying to remove that stigma here in the United States and here in the city of Seattle. So that did pass a couple of weeks ago, and it was controversial, but I hope that it means that there will be more even playing field for all of our folks in the Indian community as they come and immigrate here to the United States.
Thank you, Shasti. Thank you. I think thank you for the audience for raising so many questions, and most of the questions, because in my questions that will come, so I didn't ask. And these were the different questions people posed. So I'm just, thank you so much for the community involvement in this. And more and more, if you have, Shasti is always with us. She can definitely answer and influence if anything is required for us. And last question before that, I wanted to ask you, what is your typical day look like? You know, from the party, from the administration, from the Indo-Americans perspective, and your family, right?
Mhm.
How do you balance? What is a typical day look like?
Well, in this life and in this work, there is no typical day. Every day brings its new like opportunities and challenges. This past week I've been traveling all around the state and visiting with different members of our party and different elected officials. Today I'm headed it's like a 3-hour drive to our coast to go to our crab feed and meet some of our members in sort of Southwest Washington. So that's part of the fun, is that every day is new and sort of exciting and unpredictable. I've had to build in, some boundaries and remind people that I am a person that needs to rest and, take some time off sometimes. And I'm just trying to make sure that we have fun while we're doing this work, because the challenges are big and they're tough. These are big things that we're facing, and it's easy to just be serious about it all of the time or be stressed about it or feel, oh no, the world is hard. What am I going to do? How am I going to make change? And so I just try to stay as even keeled as I can and remember that we're doing the best that we can. And I've got a great big community that is supporting me and wants me to be successful in this role. And let's have some fun along the way and enjoy it too. We get to meet wonderful people like yourself and,
So
the Amayas of the world. Yeah.
thank you. What is the support you are looking from the community? It's not always looking help from you, but from the community, people who are viewing, what kind of support you need?
Yes. Well, people can help by supporting our Democratic Party. I have a tall order in front of me to raise significant funds to make sure that we have enough resources to get Democrats elected in Washington state. I am the first South Asian woman to lead this organization, and my success is our success. So I'll make sure that you have the link, Praveen, to be able to, follow my journey and support our Washington State Democratic Party. But that's number one. Honestly, if folks can help support and help us be successful, help me be successful. And then I'd say just like I said earlier, lean in, get involved, find the Shastis in your community that, might someday be a leader in some way or run for office, help them. And that's how we change the world. So, and that's how we keep the connection to the motherland here in the United States too, is by getting us into good spots to make some
Thank you,
good
Shasti.
trouble.
Last question. What next for you?
Well, I'm new in this job, so my focus is this job. It's a 2-year role at least, and maybe beyond that. We've got a presidential election next year, and so I'm going to do everything I can to make sure that Democrats win at every level of government. And then we'll see. Who knows? Maybe someday you'll be able to vote for me. So.
Absolutely. The closing comments. What is your best comment to the community? The entire community across the nation. What is your message?
Just be fearless, stay involved, stay engaged, care about your community, help where you can, and just know that like we're rooting for you too. So thank you so much. And I really, really have appreciated this time with you, Praveen.
Thank you, Shasti, for your time. I know that you were very busy, but you have spent almost 45 minutes plus. And thank you so much from the bottom of my heart and the entire Indian community. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
We wish you good luck.